If either of you want to walk, I won't hold it against you.
I'll be right next to you.
Dutton Ranch just finished its 9-episode first season as the biggest original series launch in Paramount Plus history, drawing 12.9 million global viewers in its first 7 days and topping the Nielsen streaming charts in a debut week that no Taylor Sheridan project had ever matched. But the numbers alone do not explain why this show hit the way it did. What Dutton Ranch accomplished across 9 episodes was something considerably more difficult than launching a successful spin-off. It took 2 of the most fully realized characters in the Yellowstone franchise, stripped them of every institutional support structure that defined their lives for 5 seasons, placed them in an unfamiliar geography surrounded by unfamiliar people, and asked the audience to watch Beth Dutton and Rip Wheeler rebuild from absolute zero. This is the complete Season 1 breakdown. Every episode, every twist, every character decision, every buried secret and slow-burning consequence. From the first frame of the series premiere to Carter's kidnapping in the Season 1 finale. This channel covers the entire Yellowstone universe at this level every single week, if that is what fans need every Friday. Hitting subscribe and leaving a like right now takes 2 seconds and means the Season 2 coverage starts the moment that first trailer drops. Now let's go back to the very beginning. Episode 1, Series Premiere, May 15, 2026. The story of Dutton Ranch Season 1 begins not in Texas, but in the shadow of everything Beth and Rip built in Montana and lost to fire. The wildfire that destroyed their Dillon Ranch is never shown on screen. It is a wound the show inherits from the end of Yellowstone and deliberately chooses not to relitigate, because Dutton Ranch understands, from its very first scene, that the audience already knows who these people are and what catastrophe looks like for them. Instead, the show drops the audience into Rio Paloma, Texas, 6 months after that fire, where Beth and Rip are attempting to construct something from absolute ground zero. Rip has taken over the cattle operations of their new ranch, with the help of a ranch hand named Azul, played by J.R. Villarreal, with a quiet competence that makes him immediately trustworthy, in a way that matters later. Carter has enrolled in the local high school at Beth's insistence, a decision that immediately establishes the central tension of his entire arc for the season, which is the tension between the boy he actually is and the version of himself that the Dutton household needs him to become. Rio Paloma is not an empty frontier waiting to be shaped by newcomers. It has its own power structure, its own history, and its own buried crimes, and the Duttons have arrived on top of one of them without understanding what they are standing on. Beulah Jackson, played by Annette Bening, with a control so absolute it registers as its own form of quiet violence, owns the 10-Petal Ranch, an operation with nearly 190 years of unbroken family history, its own slaughterhouse, and a grip on the local cattle economy so complete that other ranchers effectively operate at her discretion. The name of the game in Rio Paloma is deference to Beulah, and the first thing Beth Dutton does upon arrival is decline to play it. When Beulah's foreman approaches with an exploitative cattle processing arrangement that would subordinate the Dutton Ranch's entire output to the 10 Petals terms, Beth finds another processor, makes the alternative arrangement, and communicates through action rather than confrontation that the Duttons do not respond to pressure by yielding to it. It is a small move with enormous implications, because it announces to the most powerful woman in Rio Paloma that there is a new presence in this county who does not recognize her authority as automatic. But the most important thing Episode 1 establishes, the crime that will organize the entire season's plot, happens the night before the Duttons make any of these moves. Beulah Jackson, Beulah's biological son, played by Jai Courtney, with a menace that never tips into caricature and never loses the specific cruelty of a man who has always been protected from his own worst impulses, murdered Wes Ayers the previous night. Wes was the 10-Petal Ranch foreman, a man who had been looking into places Rob Will did not want examined. Rob Will interrogated him, and in the heat of that confrontation, shot him dead. Chet Davis was the only witness. Rob Will disposed of the body on Dutton Ranch land, the nearest available ground that was not his own, and checked himself into rehab with Chet alongside him to manage the liability. Rip discovers the partially buried body during a morning ride across their property. He tells nobody. He reburied it quietly. This is the first in a series of unilateral decisions Rip makes across Season 1 that are completely consistent with who he has always been, a man who processes threat by containing it personally rather than distributing it, and each of those decisions has a cost that compounds across the 9 episodes. In the same episode, Carter gets arrested at a local rodeo after defending Oriana, Beulah's granddaughter, Rob Will's daughter, played by Natalie Aylan Lind, with a toughness that makes her immediately more than a love interest, from an aggressive boyfriend. Oriana bails Carter out of jail. That single act of physical protection on his part and practical rescue on hers establishes the dynamic between them that runs through every subsequent episode, two young people drawn together by mutual recognition of something damaged and genuine in each other, in a situation where every adult around them has reasons to keep them apart. And in the episode's most quietly consequential secondary scene, Beth meets Everett McKinney, the local veterinarian, played by Ed Harris, with a warmth that communicates immediately, someone who has lost something enormous and rebuilt himself around what remained, when she persuades him to save an injured horse rather than euthanize it. The friendship between Beth and Everett becomes the emotional counterweight to everything violent that the season subsequently puts on the table. Episode 2, Series Premiere, Part 2, May 15, 2026. The second episode, which aired the same night as Episode 1, deepens the character architecture without forcing the central plot to accelerate before it is ready. Beth and Rip are navigating the specific emotional register of starting completely over, not just materially, but psychologically. They carry the scars of Yellowstone, the grief of Montana, and the quietly terrifying realization that the dream of building something that belongs entirely to them is more fragile than either of them had admitted to the other. Carter's relationship with Oriana continues to develop, with the kind of careful restraint that actors who trust each other and their material use. No rushed declarations, no manufactured drama, just two young people figuring out whether what they feel is real enough to act on. The episode continues to establish Rio Paloma's texture, the way small-town Texas ranching operates on informal hierarchies, personal history, and a set of unspoken rules that newcomers from Montana are going to keep accidentally violating. The body on Dutton Ranch land sits underneath all of it, quietly accumulating pressure. Episode 3, as Beth works to secure their business, May 22, 2026. Episode 3 is where the season's central mystery begins generating active heat. The most important moment in this episode is a phone call. Joaquin Reyes, Beulah's adopted son, makes a call to a voice the audience can hear, but not yet identify. The voice is authoritative, precise, and accustomed to obedience in the way that only people who have operated at a certain level of power for a very long time sound. It will not be until Episode 7 that the audience understands who that voice belongs to. In the immediate context, it functions as a signal. Joaquin has a connection outside the 10-petal ranch's visible power structure, and that connection has opinions about what is happening in Rio Paloma. Rip faces a direct physical threat this episode, the show's first indication that the Duttons' refusal to accept Beulah's original arrangement has consequences that go beyond business inconvenience. Beth continues pushing on the commercial front, trying to establish independent relationships with processors and buyers that would reduce the Dutton Ranch's exposure to the 10 petals dominance. And at the cattle auction where the season's next catastrophe is quietly being loaded, Rip purchases a new bull, a purchase that appears completely routine and will prove to be anything but. Episode 4, Start with a Bullet, May 29, 2026. Episode 4 is the season's most devastating hour outside the finale, and it earns that designation through a sequence of events that refuses to let the audience look away from what loss actually costs a person who has already lost everything once. The foot and mouth disease diagnosis arrives without warning. Rip's entire Black Angus herd, every animal he has spent 6 months building from nothing, the physical foundation of the dream he and Beth came to Texas to construct, has to be destroyed. The show does not spare the audience this reality. It makes viewers watch Rip move through his own fields, shooting every animal, one after another, with the same steady efficiency he has always brought to tasks he cannot afford to feel while he is doing them. Cole Hauser plays this sequence with a silence so total it communicates more about who Rip Wheeler is than any monologue could. A man who absorbs catastrophe by working through it methodically, because breaking down is a luxury he has never been able to afford and would not take even if it were available. Beth, discovering that the infected bull's health records were forged and tracing the paper trail back to a broker named J.R. Simon, responds in the only language this situation understands. She and Rip go to Simon's home in the middle of the night. Rip has a direct physical conversation with him, and they burn his trailer to the ground. There will be no legal complaint filed. Simon understands why. Episode 4 also gives the audience its first real look inside Everett McKinney's history. A conversation with Beulah. The two of them have been circling each other, with the specific wariness of two people who recognize something in each other they are not ready to name, reveals that Everett lost his son Levi years ago. The grief is still there, organized into the furniture of his daily life in a way that looks like management, but is actually just very practiced containment. And Carter, meanwhile, has been spending time with Dwight White, an eccentric older rancher played by Ray McKinnon, who keeps an illegal leopard on his property, and gives Carter advice about staying in school, with the weary honesty of someone who has watched too many young men make the same mistakes. Their friendship is genuine and warm, and the audience is given just enough time to care about it before Episode 5 destroys it. Episode 5, Peaceful Find Peace, June 5, 2026. Episode 5 is the pivot on which the entire season turns, and it operates on two tracks simultaneously, one strategic, one devastating. On the strategic track, with their herd gone and their financial position catastrophically weakened, Beth makes the decision that no Dutton makes easily. She goes to Beulah Jackson with a proposal. Beth has done her research thoroughly and without sentiment. The 10-Petal Ranch, for all its surface dominance, is financially fragile, a 190-year-old operation that has been surviving on reputation and leverage rather than genuine liquidity. The drought that preceded the Duttons' arrival in Rio Paloma nearly destroyed it. Beth proposes a deal, her financial intelligence and business development expertise in exchange for 20% of profits when they sell beef, with a firm 5-year exit clause for both her and Rip. Beulah accepts. Rip becomes the new 10-Petal Ranch foreman, replacing Chet Davis, who is immediately and visibly furious about this displacement. Beth begins embedding herself in the financial architecture of the most powerful operation in Rio Paloma, which is also, though she does not yet know it, the operational front for a cartel fentanyl pipeline running drugs through cattle shipments from Mexico. On the devastating track, Carter is with Dwight when Sheriff Wade and his officers arrive at Dwight's property. Dwight panics and runs toward his leopard. Carter runs after him, shouting for the officers to stop. Wade shoots Dwight dead. The official account, that Dwight came at Wade with a knife, forcing defensive action, is contradicted by the detail that Carter notices in the immediate aftermath. Dwight's knife was still in its holster on his belt when the shot was fired. This detail, planted clearly enough for the audience to register it, establishes two facts that matter enormously for the rest of the season. First, Sheriff Wade is not a trustworthy authority figure. He is the kind of law enforcement officer who constructs narratives around lethal force rather than accounting for it honestly. Second, Carter is now carrying the weight of a death he witnessed and cannot prove was murder, in a county where reporting it would accomplish nothing and potentially make things worse. The episode closes with Rip finally telling Beth about the body from episode 1. They agree to proceed with caution. In practice, this means they have decided to handle the entire situation themselves, off the legal record, in the way that every Dutton has always handled problems that the law cannot be trusted to solve. Episode 6, A Cowboy Saint, June 12, 2026. Episode 6 is widely considered the season's most consequential single hour before the finale, and the events it sets in motion reshape every relationship in Rio Paloma for the remaining 3 episodes. Chet Davis, displaced from the 10-Petal foreman position by Rip's arrival and furious about it, goes directly to Joaquin with a blackmail offer. Give him his job back, or he will expose what he knows about the Wes Ayers murder. Joaquin's response is one of the season's most chilling exchanges. He walks Chet through the forensic reality of the situation, with the calm precision of someone who has been thinking about this exact conversation for a long time. The murder weapon carries 3 sets of fingerprints: Rob Will's as the shooter, Rip's from when he disarmed him at the gas station in episode 1, and Chet's own from handling the weapon afterward. The moment Sheriff Wade sends that gun to any forensic lab, all 3 men are implicated. There are 2 ways to leave a ranch, Joaquin tells him. Chet hears the implication clearly. He leaves the conversation and goes directly to the one person he believes can protect him, Rob Will, who has secretly returned from rehab without Beulah's knowledge and is already planning his next move. Rob Will sends Chet to attack Joaquin. The attack ends with Joaquin wounded in the hand and Chet shot dead by Miguel, Joaquin's man, almost before the confrontation fully develops. Chet Davis, who has been a liability since episode 1, is removed from the board with an efficiency that communicates how this world handles loose ends. Meanwhile, Beth and Beulah travel to Chicago together, which is its own kind of landmark. 2 exceptionally intelligent, exceptionally guarded women in an enclosed space for long enough that the masks slip slightly. They land a major commercial deal with Zane Nash, a restaurant mogul who agrees to serve 10 Petal Black Angus steaks across his entire chain. On the return journey, Beulah tells Beth carefully edited versions of her family history, that Rob Will's father died in a flood, that she raised Joaquin as her own after his father ran into legal trouble. Every detail she offers is technically accurate and completely misleading, which is the specific skill set of someone who has been protecting a secret for 4 decades. Beth listens and notes it, and stores it as raw material for a later conversation she has not yet decided to have. The episode closes with Rip learning who murdered Wes Ayers. The crime has a name, and that name belongs to the son of the woman who signs his paycheck and whose foreman he has become. Episode 7, Den of Sin, June 19, 2026. Episode 7 is the episode that recontextualizes everything that came before it, and it accomplishes this through a structural decision that is both bold and narratively elegant. It goes back to 1981. The flashback opens in Fort Worth at Billy Bob's, Texas, where a young Beulah Jackson, played by Rebecca Robles, with a spirited warmth that makes the tragedy that follows land with genuine force, is out celebrating with friends. Her father has assigned Mariano, the young ranch hand who is already the father of the infant Joaquin, to watch over her for the evening. Mariano gets distracted. Beulah meets a man named Luke at the bar. Later that night, she is sexually assaulted by him. The assault is handled with restraint and clarity. The show does not sensationalize it, but it does not minimize it either, because what happens to young Beulah in 1981 is the event that every subsequent decision in her life is a response to. What follows from the assault is the chain of causation that has been quietly organizing the entire season. Beulah discovers she is pregnant with Rob Will. She finds Luke and goes to his home with Mariano, who watches helplessly as she executes him with a gun she brought specifically for that purpose. Mariano, out of loyalty to Beulah's family and genuine terror of her father's power, agrees to take the blame for the murder. He flees to Mexico, leaving his infant son Joaquin behind in Beulah's care. He builds himself, over the following 40 years, into a cartel kingpin, the most powerful criminal operator in northern Mexico. He is Mariano Reyes, played in the finale by Raul Max Trujillo. The 10 Petal Ranch's criminal arrangement, the fentanyl pipeline, the cattle smuggling, the cartel money running through legitimate livestock operations, is the price Beulah has been paying for Mariano's silence and his protection since the drought nearly destroyed everything she built. In the present-day timeline, the 10 Petal Ranch's 190th anniversary party becomes the episode's dramatic arena. Beulah has planned to announce Joaquin as her official successor, a decision that Everett, Beth, Zane Nash, and every professional observer understands as the correct one. Instead, at the moment of the announcement, she names Rob Will. The humiliation Joaquin absorbs in that moment, in public, in front of everyone in Rio Paloma who matters, is the kind of wound that does not heal. Joaquin walks out. Carter, who has been drinking far beyond his tolerance, creates a scene that damages the family's relationship with the Jacksons, in ways that will have consequences. And then, in the episode's final seconds, Beulah grabs her neck in pain and collapses. Everett calls for a medevac. The screen cuts to black, without telling the audience whether she survives. Episode 8, Whiskey Limits, June 26, 2026. Episode 8 resolves the cliffhanger without delay. Beulah survived. She underwent an emergency angioplasty and is recovering. What the episode does with that survival is more interesting than the survival itself, because Beulah, managing the 10-petal ranch from a hospital bed, reveals how completely her identity is organized around the exercise of control. She directs Rob Will to work alongside Joaquin. She insists that Rip and Beth's contracts be honored. She manages her succession crisis from a prone position with the same iron precision she applies to every other problem in her life. Rob Will, now formally installed as heir, is operating with the authority his mother gave him and none of the restraint he never possessed in the first place. The hospital scenes between Beulah and Everett are among the season's most emotionally honest. Two people who have been circling each other all season, finally acknowledging, in the most understated possible way, that what they have built between them is more than professional friendship. Everett tells her he is committed to whatever comes next for her. She receives this with the particular vulnerability of someone who has spent 40 years making sure nobody could hurt her and has just decided to let one person try. Meanwhile, Austin Lewis, the 10-petal hand who has been quietly assembling evidence of the ranch's criminal activity all season, brings his suspicions directly to Rip and Beth, confirming what they have already started to deduce about the special deliveries arriving from Mexico. Beth sits with this information and begins constructing what to do with it. Carter runs away from home after the anniversary party's fallout, not as a dramatic gesture, but as the response of a 19-year-old who has run out of capacity to manage everything he is carrying and has nowhere to direct the overflow. Beth cannot find him. The episode closes with both ranches in a visible state of armed preparation, and with Beth telling Carter, when she finally reaches him by phone, that the hard parts are coming and she needs him ready for them. It is not comfort. It is a contract between two people who have chosen each other, under terms that are about to become considerably more demanding. Episode 9, El Padrino, July 3, 2026. The Season 1 finale opens with the confrontation the entire 9 episodes have been building toward. Rip and Beth position themselves at the 10-petal ranch to intercept the latest cattle delivery from Mexico, armed with Austin's intelligence and their own months of accumulated suspicion. Rob Will appears and attempts to shut them down, an error in judgment that costs him immediately when Rip dismantles him with the precise, economic violence of a man who has handled physical threats since before Rob Will learned to ride. Cole Hauser plays this fight with the calm authority of someone who has never for a single moment been uncertain about the outcome, which is exactly how Rip fights everything. While Rip is handling Rob Will, Everett McKinney examines the cattle shipment and finds what has been concealed inside them. Approximately $2 million worth of fentanyl, packed into the body cavities of animals that cross the Mexican border as legitimate livestock. This is the operational core of the 10-petal ranch's survival for the past several years. Not heritage ranching, not Black Angus beef, a drug pipeline. Everett confronts Beulah directly with this discovery, and Beulah, perhaps exhausted by the weight of 4 decades of secret-keeping, and freshly aware of her own mortality after the heart attack, tells him the complete and unedited truth for the first time in the show. Rob Will is the child of her assault. She killed the man who assaulted her. Mariano disposed of the body and took the blame because her father was the most powerful man he knew, and he was terrified of him. Mariano fled to Mexico and built his cartel empire from nothing. When the drought threatened the 10-petal's survival, Joaquin brought her Mariano's offer. Allow the cartel's product to move through the ranch's cattle operation, and the ranch would survive. She accepted. She has been paying that arrangement's costs ever since. Beth and Rip receive the drugs from the shipment, decide they want no part of it, and package it up to return to Beulah, along with a clear message that the Duttons are done with this arrangement, regardless of what it costs either family. Mariano arrives at 10-petal ranch in person, Raul Max Trujillo stepping fully into the role the season has been building toward since that phone call in episode 3. He is composed, unhurried, and completely certain of his authority. He tells Beulah she has two choices: re-announce Joaquin publicly as her successor and send the Dutton strangers away from Rio Paloma permanently, or face the consequences of his displeasure. Beulah drives to the Dutton Ranch to attempt this conversation. Beth meets her at the end of a shotgun. Neither Beth nor Rip is interested in listening to explanations from the woman whose ranch has been running fentanyl through their county, and they hand back the drugs and tell her to leave. Mariano's response to this refusal is immediate and unambiguous. He sends armed men to kill Beth and Rip at the Dutton Ranch. The firefight that follows is brief, decisive, and clarifying. Everett proves remarkably capable under fire. Azul takes a non-fatal hit, and the attackers are driven off without major Dutton casualties. But the firefight is not the finale's most important scene. That distinction belongs to Oriana. Rob Will, in the hour before everything breaks, has a private conversation with his daughter that the show handles with unexpected tenderness. Father and daughter, a man who has been the season's primary villain having a genuine, unguarded moment with the only person in his life he has never fully weaponized. It is the first time the season has shown Rob Will as something other than a threat, and the timing is deliberate. The show is giving the audience a reason to feel something about his death before it happens. Oriana leaves the room. There is a knock at the front door. A gunshot rings out. Oriana finds her father bleeding out in the entryway, and a car, Joaquin's car, speeding away from the property. Whether Joaquin actually pulled the trigger is the season's most carefully preserved ambiguity. The show never depicts the murder on screen. Actor Juan Pablo Raba has publicly noted that the audience never sees Joaquin fire a weapon, only Joaquin sitting in his car with a gun, appearing to think hard about whether he can do what Mariano ordered him to do, and then Joaquin in the same car afterward. Mariano, who openly expressed contempt for his son's capacity for violence and ordered Rob Will's death as a test of initiative, would almost certainly have sent a second operative as insurance against Joaquin's hesitation. Who actually killed Rob Will is the first major mystery Season 2 inherits from Season 1. Beulah arrives at 10 Petal Ranch to find her son dead on the floor. Whatever remained of her controlled exterior dissolves entirely in that single discovery, and Annette Bening plays the moment with a rawness that feels genuinely private, as if the camera caught something the character never intended to show anyone. Meanwhile, Mariano has Carter. He did not take Carter as the prize. Rip understands this immediately when the phone call comes. Carter is the lure. Mariano's quarrel is with Beth and Rip, who walked into his territory, disrupted his operation, and refused to leave when given the opportunity. Carter is how he gets them to come to him, on ground he controls, at a time of his choosing. Beth gets the call from Mariano directly. He has Carter. He has a score to settle that goes back further and runs deeper than the Duttons' 9 months in Rio Paloma. Beth tells Rip. Both of them begin preparing for what is coming. The season ends not on defeat, but on a declaration of war from two people who have spent their entire lives refusing to lose. Dutton Ranch Season 1 accomplished something genuinely difficult. It created a new show out of beloved existing characters, honored who those characters have always been, while giving them new dimensions that 5 seasons of Yellowstone never had space for, and built a supporting world rich enough to carry its own weight independently. Kelly Riley found a Beth Dutton who is still completely herself, but quieter in her grief, more precise in her love, and more frightened of losing again than the original series ever allowed her to be. Cole Hauser found a Rip Wheeler, stripped of every institutional protection Yellowstone provided, and revealed the specific courage required to build something when you have no advantages except your own character. Annette Bening created a villain whose crimes are inseparable from her wounds. Ed Harris built a man defined by what he survived, and Finn Little made Carter, infuriating, heartbreaking, relentlessly human Carter, into a character the audience has genuinely earned the right to worry about going into Season 2. The finale airs July 3, 2026, on Paramount Plus and the Paramount Network. Season 2 has been confirmed with Benjamin Cavell as showrunner, and the full main cast returning. The video on screen covers everything fans need to know about where Season 2 goes from here.